This episode was produced in cooperation with the ETH Entrepreneur Club, a student organization which aims to inspire, educate, and empower the next generation of entrepreneurs. The ETH Entrepreneur Club holds more than 40 events every year, resulting in an impressive alumni list of successful startups. If you want to keep up with their busy agenda, make sure to give them a follow on social media.
In rich countries, there is much more waste of food, and in poor countries, there is people that don't even get food, right? But even if you would try to redistribute everything, you will still, if you want to compensate for the growth of the population, you will need to increase also the output of food.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Ansuya.
Welcome, Miller, to the Swisspreneur podcast. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you very much, Ansuya, for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here today.
So Miller is the co-founder and CTO at Grundo, a technology advisory and analytics startup aimed at tackling sustainability challenges globally. I'm really excited to talk more about Grundo and how it all began. This is a very important topic anyway these days, with a lot of clean tech startups coming up. So really excited to know about your journey. So let's start with your background. You got your PhD in physics from ETH, and then you continued working as a researcher and a lecturer. Were you perfectly content to be in the academic sphere all your life, or did you always wish a bit to put more things into an entrepreneurial practice?
Yeah, okay, so let's say, I think from the beginning, I remember that I always wanted to do something that has an impact in society. So basically, I started a career as a physicist because I thought, okay, I can jump in any other field easily because you have the background of analytics, math, and this part as a skill set. But then somehow I started liking a lot academia in my journey. So then that's why I started the PhD, and then I on board as a postdoc. Later on, became a senior scientist at ETH. But then I realized that there was a huge issue in academia, which is basically the funding. Right?
Yeah.
And then you can also see that there is a lot of funding going to other sectors, but basic research and all these sectors that kind of are important, they are not really taken seriously. Let's put as an example, for instance, the X-rays, right? So the X-rays were discovered by an accident, right?
That's
so
true.
Imagine the person discovering the X-rays trying to apply for a fund or for some money for a grant, right? And then try to fight, trying to get the money, and then maybe they don't get it, right? We wouldn't have X-rays, right? But it happens as an accident in a lab. And then right now, so it's very much used in for medical purposes.
Yeah.
So something like that. So then that's why I thought, okay, so that's okay with academia, but I really want to have something impactful in society. And you do have some impact in let's say in the university because you teach, right? So you kind of help to shape the minds of the future people, right? But I wanted to have tangible impact, I could see it right away, and therefore I quit academia, right? And then I tried to pursue some journeys, first of all trying to bring funding into the academic world in a way to create a sustainable economy around it, meaning, for instance, using scientific models for financial instruments, and then using the revenues that come from them and injecting them to grants for research or something like this. So that was my main purpose.
Yeah, you have a very interesting background because as a personal project, the first thing you did, when you quit academia, you started building trading algorithms. So you did you also studied financial studies at the time and did portfolio management, right, as well.
Yeah, I think like this was more because, I mean, when during my PhD, I was pretty much focused on statistical physics.
Right.
And then, I mean, this is a statistics, so you can apply to any type of like time series or financial time series. So then I was learning a lot about it. I also took some lectures on econophysics, which is like this bridge between science and economy. Then I started building trading algorithms that they could work like automated based on scientific models and so on. Yeah, so there is where my journey, let's say, as a kind of a trader started, and I started learning about this investment portfolio theories, etc. Right.
So this was more the interest because you knew there was like money to be made in the financial area that you could then use to fund your other ideas as well.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, because I think in the end, I feel like if you can really use this knowledge and use it for in the financial world, let's say asset management, I mean, you will make profits, and these profits you can use it to finance any other type of projects, even like even charity or like anything else, right? But then you can make a closed economy, because I think like one of the biggest issue in science is that it cannot generate its own revenue.
Yeah.
So it's not direct, right? But this was a way to make it directly.
So at that time, were you already having an idea that you wanted to fund, or you were playing around still with different ideas?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, there are a couple of ideas, but they are super crazy, I think. I mean, like, yeah. I mean,
give us an example. I'm sure people will be curious.
But it's super crazy. I mean, it's like, for instance, one idea is like, let's say, so there is this will sound crazy, but yeah. So one idea is that, I mean, you know that to send a rocket to space, right, you need to consume a lot of fuel, and then you need to fight against gravity, right? And I'm always curious because, let's say, in the fundamentals of science, right, there is this like fundamental forces, let's say, and one is gravity, and the other one is electromagnetism, and etc. So there is no such a, let's say, I mean, scientists are on the search of a theory that can combine all of them. Right, and I think like one of the biggest advantage if someone managed to make this combination is that you could maybe create a device that can create anti-gravity, right? So this is something like I thought, okay, that would be really cool to try at least, right? But like writing a grant about that, it will sound so crazy that nobody will give you money. Right? So then I thought, okay, but if you create this closed economy and then you can really focus on these use cases, because if you manage to get this ecosystem, I mean, this will be fantastic, because you don't need to burn all these fuels to launch a rocket.
I mean, I think a little bit of crazy is needed, right? Look at Elon Musk, for example.
For example, yeah. I think like, I mean, this is amazing. What he's doing is really amazing, because it's like, he did the whole career, of course, by himself. I mean, he really grew up. Right, but right now he's really like focusing on projects that he likes, right? And I really love that from him.
Yeah. Really, I mean, coming from then a space idea to really the ground with Grundo, let's also get into that. First of all, I mean, because you quit academia and you started exploring this other path around the time when COVID hit, right? Did that also impact in any way your entrepreneurial ideas and endeavors?
Yes, I mean, actually, because Grundo was basically born during COVID. So I think the whole point, I mean, let's say when COVID started, so if you remember, everybody was in their places, right? And people barely meet each other in person. So basically, I was in my flat, in my apartment. And then we got in touch with a couple of friends. And then we decided to make like this weekly meeting, where we were going to discuss how, based on our skill sets, can we change the world. Right. And then we started 4 people. Then later one person got a job. So then he left. Right. So then we stayed 3 people. But then we started inviting people in the talks, in this type of like mini chats that they were doing every Wednesday. Nice. And then we invited a person very close to one of my friends from Indonesia. And then he brought a very important use case, which is really important at that time, which is like food security. So if we remember during COVID, many countries, like for instance, Vietnam is one example, they stopped exporting rice because of the fear that there will be a shortage of food, or like maybe COVID will affect the supply chain. So then they started looking at the agricultural sector, and they realized that, I mean, in Indonesia, there are a lot of like plantations of palm oil, right? But the population don't eat palm oil. So in principle, there was this need of like knowing what is planted where, and maybe also to propose like a redistribution of the land. But on the other hand, if you propose a redistribution of the land, you have to know that farmers will not be happy to change for a crop if their income is punished. I mean, if they get less income.
Yeah.
So then it was like a very strategical move. So first of all, you need to know what is planted where, and then later on build a redistribution of the land that farmers can be happy as well, right? So that their life standards don't get affected. And then we came up with a solution. We said, okay, but let's say, I mean, there is satellite data, which can map an entire country, right? And we can use artificial intelligence to map pixel by pixel and the whole map, and then know which type of crop is planted where. And then we can create that map that the government can later use to propose a new redistribution. And this friend of my colleague, he got happy about the idea. So then he communicated to other friends and then expressed somehow in his network. And then we got in contact with a person close to the agricultural ministry in Indonesia. And this was the first project. So in the end, we got executed that project. And then we said, okay, we need to get paid. So then we set up the Grundo in Singapore. Yeah, in order to get the payment. So this was, let's say, the starting of the whole journey as well.
So basically now, your three co-founders, Alan Kedul and Franco Isima, right?
Yes.
So in 2020, based out of this brainstorming, Grundo got founded. And was it in any way then connected to the research that you'd been developing at ETH as well?
Yes, because I was working a lot in statistical physics, so I was also very close to the field of artificial intelligence, and data analytics.
Yeah.
So because we are used to process a lot of data in statistics, so for me it was very easy to use these skill sets, basically to start exploring the data, the satellite data in that case, and then start building all this modeling or analytics that you need in order to extract these insights. Yeah, because you have a pixel right from a photo, and then you need to know, okay, which type of crop is that? You need to do some post-processing and analytics. And
so how does this help to solve the sustainability challenge? If you can explain a bit that as well with the precision agriculture that you focus on.
Yes. So I think the whole point is because if we think about the purpose of this project, for instance, the first project was pretty much about food security, right? Because countries were afraid of not having enough food for their population.
Right.
And if you look at the global picture, and you see the statistics, I mean, the United Nations has like some values on it. It says that by 2050, we need to increase the agricultural output between 50 to 70% to have enough food for the global population. Which means that, I mean, we need to also use technology in order to make this process more efficient, right? Because right now, I mean, agriculture, if you see, is a sector where there is not much technology applied, and there is this gap there. Precision agriculture is basically this sector in which you bring all this innovation, AI, or even like Internet of Things, or like even like drones and all these things. And then you try to help the farmers or the industrial farmers or the food producers even to optimize that process, right? So that there is more yield,
Right.
and there is less resources expended, so it's more efficient. Yeah, and then you can slightly start increasing this agricultural output for food security.
So, I mean, at times I hear things like where they say that there's enough food being produced in the world at the moment, but it's not distributed correctly. So there's more food wastage than it is a problem of how much food is being produced. But when I hear you're saying that we need to produce more as well. So is that because of the population increase, or why is it?
Yes, that's because of the population increase. But these are like, I think, two different problems. I mean, one thing is like the let's say the food for the global population. But another thing is, of course, I mean, usually in like rich countries, there is much more waste of food. And in poor countries, there is people that don't even get food.
Yeah.
Right? But even if you would like try to redistribute everything, you will still, if you want to compensate for the growth of the population, you will need to increase also the output of food. So it's a little bit different. This goes more in the direction of supply chain. Which is actually also impacted by climate change and these things. So,
Okay. So then how will climate change affect food security, globally?
Yeah. So I think like one of the biggest consequence of climate change is the let's say the variation of the weather or the wild variation of the weather. So meaning that we will experience more frequently like heavy rain, more frequently heavy droughts, or like this kind of like climate weather changes will change very abruptly, and therefore things like crops that they maybe are good, let's say for dry weather, they will not be very good because there will be a lot of rain, right? Or vice versa. So maybe there are some crops that they don't need so much water, and there is a lot of rain, so then they will not grow properly. So they will lose like this. The plant will lose the properties of provide the crop, right? But on the other hand, there is also like if there is a lot of heavy rains, so the soil will lose fertility. Yeah, because there is this process called erosion, where you wash out the first layer of the soil, and this makes have an impact, because if the soil is not fertile, so then there will not be food either. So these are like the direct links between the climate change and in order to, let's say, to mitigate the food security.
So then my next question is that if basically like climate and weather is becoming so unpredictable, and AI is pretty much based on learning patterns and predicting things, so how would AI then be able to help here?
Yeah, I think that this is like also, I remember I have this discussion with many people as well, especially with some investors as well. Because it's true that there are two different things. There are like what we know about the crops, right? We know how kind of like a crop grows and what it needs to grow properly and healthy. On the other hand, we know what are the consequences of some environmental variables like weather, right, on those crops. And we can use this knowledge, in principle, to predict what would happen in every scenario. And this will already help, let's say, for prevention. You can already prepare.
Right.
Because you cannot, obviously, as you mentioned, you cannot control these variations on the weather, right? But you can be prepared. You can have this goes pretty much in like the climate action, right? So we know the climate is changing. So what are our plans, right, for that? We need to be prepared. And these are type of like this.
Okay. So who are your customer segments? Like who's looking at this data that you provide?
Yeah, right now, I think, our main clients are governments, of course, because, first of all, they are pretty much interested in food security. Also, for instance, specifically here in Switzerland, farmer gets some subsidies from the state based on the type of crops that they plant. And they usually do this reporting, and then the government needs to do some verification there. So, if you see at the country level, so it's very hard to send a person to go everywhere in every point on the country to check that. So that's why using satellite data and AI is very handy, because you just from your desk you can just make the map, right, and then okay, there is wheat here, or there is corn here, etc. That's one segment. The other segment is the insurance companies, because there is this also like crop insurance, which means that, for instance, a farmer usually, their income depends pretty much on the yield that they produce after the harvesting. And the problem is with climate change. So maybe there was a heavy rain, or everything got flooded, and then there is no yield, right? So then the farmer will not have an income. So that's why crop insurance is important, because then they will have an insurance. So if something happens, they will still get some income. So insurance companies, in order to compute the premium for those farmers, they need to have some data, right? That therefore they are one segment that consume this data, these analytics, in order to make these calculations.
So it's basically benefiting multiple parties at this point to work together and try to support the farmers in the best way possible.
Yes, exactly. And also, there is also in the financial sector, like more on the heavy financial sector, I call it, like in the trading, commodity trading. It could also be beneficial. It's just that it's a little bit more difficult to enter in this space, because usually they like to develop strategies in-house, obviously because of competition. So basically, if you provide this data to one, so probably you cannot provide the same data to another one that is a competitor. So in this sector, I mean, the data will be very useful, the technology, but it's much harder to, let's say, get a client on that space.
So let's talk about like how you went about getting your footing also in multiple countries, right? You touched upon it a bit, like how you had your first client in Indonesia. So at this point, you are basically a Swiss, Singapore, and Colombian company, so operating in Asia, Europe, and Colombia. So at this point, delivering results globally. And let's talk a bit about like how that went about. So you touched upon it a bit with Indonesia, and how do you then, acquire your clients, and what was the reason behind also having these other entities?
Yeah, I think like we basically started like with cold emails. So basically trying to detect in every jurisdiction on every country who would be potentially interested on the services, on the products. And then we just wrote several emails. I mean, of course, most of them we never got a reply.
Yeah.
From some others, we got a reply where we didn't go into a call and the usual business. But yeah, so I think like every company, I mean, it's not that we are spreading in everywhere just randomly. It's like really like every setup of a company has its own reasons. So the first one in Singapore, it was because of our first contract, right? But after we got that contract, we realized that this is potentially a problem that you have in any other places in the world. So therefore, and because we are based in Switzerland, so then we start also trying to talk to the Swiss government and to entities in Switzerland. And then we found out that there was also a need on that. So that's why we got another contract here. And then we realized, okay, so it's probably better to have a Swiss entity to deal with the Swiss clients, right? It makes the process much easier. And then that's why we set up the Swiss company.
So your first client, you said, was from Indonesia, but you set up the entity in Singapore. Was that because one of your co-founders is from there? Or?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah, because Franco is from Singapore, and he was there. And then, it was straightforward to make it there. And also because from Singapore, basically you have access to the whole Southeast Asia, which is Indonesia, and then you have Malaysia, etc. Yeah. Also, he knows. Let's say he has a very good network in that sector, so it was key.
Makes sense. And then basically Switzerland happened with the second project, as you mentioned. And then how did the third project happen in Colombia?
Yeah, I think like there were a few more projects in Switzerland. And then we start like talking with different type of like spaces, like other part of departments, let's say, also in environmental protection, etc. But the project in Colombia, it was super interesting because, I mean, I'm Colombian originally, so I'm part of the National Space Society in Colombia. And there I went to an annual meeting like 2 years ago or something. And then I got in touch with a professor of a university that has some experience in a field called spectroscopy. And then I thought, okay, and then I started talking to him, and then I thought, okay, I have this idea, right? Because right now, and the more we talk with clients, there is a big issue, and it's that either you have enough data, let's say in terms of like satellite images, but you don't have enough resolution from them to tackle the real problems. So we really saw that clients had some problems, some issues, and the data was not enough, right? And then one solution is, of course, launch satellites with better sensors, right? But this is like the more expensive solution. But I always had in mind that by using AI, one can enhance the information that is contained on the satellite data, for instance, from the Copernicus program of the ESA, European Space Agency. And then I commented this idea to him, and then he kind of resonated with the idea, and then he has the skill set. And then I said, okay, let's start the project. I mean, my idea was first, okay, I do some part of the task, and he does as a person the other part of the task. But what happens is that he basically built the entire project in Colombia, and then we even enrolled a couple of people to work in. And then we got the need to hire those people because, I mean, in Colombia it's safer to hire when they have to do the work. And some of them, they were students, so then they wanted to do the internship in Grundo. But then with Grundo Switzerland, it's really difficult to make an internship in Colombia. So then I thought, okay, so in order to kickstart this project, because it has a lot of potential, So then let's set up a Colombian entity. So
Right.
we enroll them, right? And then we perform the project. That was the story of the Colombian entity.
Okay. So now it also allows you to do more projects easily from Colombian market as well.
Yes, exactly. And now we have a foot there as well, so we can talk with more people. People can check the company constitution there. Yeah.
Okay. So when you talk about also just going from, my technical brain, that you can also enhance the images from the satellite. So do you do some kind of image processing with computer vision as well on those images?
Not really in that sense, because we are changing really like the type of channels. Like, let's say, like a typical image has like 3 colors, right? Red, green, and blue.
Yeah.
Right. So usually a satellite image from the European Space Agency, it has 12 colors, to say it like this, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is to convert these 12 colors into something that is 200 colors, right?
I see.
And for doing that, so the idea is to use a similar principle of AI, like face recognition. Like when you see, for instance, your phone, you take your phone and then there is this face recognition. What it really does is just take a few points on your face and it already knows that you are that person.
I guess they also do that with all the images they get from like Hubble's telescope and these other telescopes as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
They use similar techniques exactly to enhance the type of information that you get. Yeah.
That's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that brings me to my next question, because you had also mentioned that one of the challenges that you faced together with your co-founders was having this sort of common language, because you having a technical background and being technical and they being more from the business side brought a lot of difficult conversations. So how did you go about that?
Yeah, I think it was like a very interesting learning curve. I think like it was super interesting for me because I was sometimes in the calls and they were talking about, B2B, B2C, for instance, these terms for me were like, what is that, right? And then I have to go very quickly and then like Google them. In the beginning, I really was not knowing any terminology on business.
Yeah.
And then I had to catch up. Right? Because in the end, it's not only them, but also the clients. And because there was a very small team, we were always, all of us in the call, right, with the clients. So I needed to catch up with that, to learn that.
Yeah.
And then I think it was a very interesting experience. But on the other hand, of course, when we were like, separating tasks among the team members, so then sometimes there was a little bit of a misalignment, right? At least in the first months, right? Because then we thought we understood each other, but in the end, everybody was doing something different. And it took me some time to realize that this language, right? Business language is technical language. Also, the way you explain things, because like, let's say if I want to explain to a client, for instance, which has no technical background, or if I want to explain to someone that has no technical background, I need to put my foot on their shoes, right? And then try to phrase everything in a way that this person can understand. Yeah. And this was like
layman terms.
Yeah, in a layman terms. And this took me like a while, right? But I'm happy that I managed to go through it. And then I'm depending on the person that I'm talking to, then I can adapt.
Yeah.
Right? And explain things like more technical, less technical, and navigate that.
I think that's super important, because I see that many often, especially between like CTOs and other co-founders, that many times there is this communication gap. And, depending, sometimes CTOs could have some very special personalities, and, you really need to like be able to come to common ground, and it helps in general to have a vision to work towards, which everyone understands.
Yeah, I think the fact that we were always in the clients also help a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because if you are just in a close group, you maybe fight, right? But if you are in a client, you know that, okay, you have a gap to fulfill, right?
Yes.
So you need to learn, because you need to explain to the client,
Yeah.
right? So it was more my obligation in that sense, to catch up rather than to impose my way.
I mean, that comes to also then the problem you're talking about, that at a company level, you mentioned that in our previous call that there were bigger challenges where many clients do not even know what they need. So they know their problems, but they do not know how to tackle that. So how did you come about then closing projects with them? Like, and what helped them gain your trust, or the other way around?
Yeah, I think like this is something that I would say, the team is quite talented, I would say. This is one of our main value propositions.
Yeah.
So it's like we are quite good in a way to listen to the client, and then to propose many solutions. So we can come up even in the same call with many potential solutions. But it's really about that. It's really about listening, understanding, and then trying to have a conversation on a level that everybody can understand. So without going, for instance, in my case, too technical, right? Or in another case, for instance, if the client that we are talking to is a technical person, so then something that is not so like too much business oriented, right? So we need to detect who is the other person there, which we are talking. And according to that, then one of us was taking the lead, into talking and like guiding the conversation. And then overall, we are like, okay, we listen, we understand the issue, we know the technologies around. Also because, I mean, we have a very interesting, like really like skill sets, let's say, between the co-founders. So we could really like come up and then like Lego pieces we could build and then put all things together and then come up, okay, we could do this, and that, right? And then try to convince the client then that this is something potentially that will solve their problems. Yeah.
So, I mean, the plus point of doing that is, of course, you acquire customers and you gain their trust. But then on the flip side, it's like you end up going more and more towards custom solutions for each client. And then how did that impact, because when you're talking to investors, like last year when you were raising funds, like was that posing to be a challenge and what happened?
Yes, of course. I mean, this was really like, I think like this is still like the biggest challenge, right? So it's like, because when we talk with so many clients, I mean, we have like a huge list of clients that we talk to, we really detected like the main core problems. So, and we even did like a heat map of all the problems that people has in the ecosystem of all like food security in general. And then we decided to say, okay, so let's focus on this problem. We built a solution for it. We built a product and then we scale it up. That was the idea, right? So then we created like the whole deck, we created everything, right? Then we went to talk to investors, and then it was a mess because, let's say, Grundo is not, it's not an early stage company in the sense because it has revenues, right? But those revenues were not coming because of that product that we wanted to build, right? So if you create a valuation of the company based on these revenues, it's not compatible with what the product is capable. See? So therefore, this is one thing. Just on the let's say on the financials, right? But on the other hand, on the investors' understanding, it was also challenging because then the investor was more like, okay, but wait, so you are a consulting company then, right? And then we were like, well, we were, but we are trying to change the business model, right? But then once we make this switch, because we were talking with investors at the early stage, so then it's like a little bit confusing. So then they were like, okay, no. Some of them, they just say, oh, we don't invest in consulting companies without further listening.
If you're too transparent or saying words even slightly differently, it can come across something you don't want to actually make it come across like that.
Yeah. So that's why I thought in the end, we kind of managed to be quite, we spoke also with many investors, so we managed to improve our way to communicate the message, right? But
because everything is leading to your product in the end anyway. It's not like you're doing random consulting and building a totally different product.
Exactly. But then, for instance, like one of the let's say in the end we got a couple of like, let's say, investors interested, right? But then we got also this kind of like a chicken and an egg problem, meaning that, so some investors were saying, okay, I'm happy to invest, but we want you to have one client for that product. Right. But then when we went to the potential clients, they were like, okay, the product is really nice, but then we want the product ready in order to buy it. Right. So then it was like chicken and an egg. So you don't know and then these were the things kind of like we said, okay, we have already some leads. We have some investors that are interested. So, but then definitely we need to build the product and then we need to bootstrap it. Right. So, and then we decided to continue that path.
Okay. But what were then the challenges that you faced approaching also sort of these big insurance companies? Because they also have so many people coming and offering them different products. So what were...
I think the main challenge there was because really, as let's say, they get a lot of companies try to sell their services. And then it was first this way to break the ice first, such that they understand that we are providing something that is not the standard, because we were really coming from talking with many clients, so we really kind of knew the problem. So I think like the most important added value that we brought, it was more about the solving the use case specifically rather than the technology, right? And most of the other clients that they had or providers that they had, they were more focusing on the technology, right? And then sometimes we were even saying, yeah, of course you can use AI for this, and that, but you will have more many products, right? But you still need to integrate all of them to solve your problem.
Yeah.
But we give you the integrated solution for this problem. Right? But it was more like to transmit that message that it was challenging in the beginning because many of them, they were already with a mindset like, oh, this is another startup trying to sell the product.
Yeah.
Right? So it took us time to, to dig into that, etc., and get their, let's say, their listening. Yeah.
And do you think that involved a lot of also educating them on all these topics, or?
I know they are really well. I mean, they are pretty well educated.
Okay.
I mean, they know really the technology around. I mean, we were really able to talk also technical discussions, and they knew. I mean, they really know what they are doing.
Okay,
yeah,
that's
it's
good
just,
to know.
Exactly. It's just that they still they gather data from different sources and they need to build all this stuff, which is still very difficult. I mean, you see it, in the whole complexity. And then we were like, look, but we can do it even with better precision, with better this, but we also aggregate all these things, and create that solution for you, you see? And this is the part that it was there.
Okay. And then how did you deal with sort of the long decision-making process that also comes with these bigger customers?
Yeah, well, we are still waiting for some of them. So I mean, especially, the bigger the company, the more time you need to wait, right? So, I mean, startups are characterized because they can change fast, they can take decisions very fast. But when it comes to bigger corporations, so they have different, bosses of bosses, and they need to communicate that message. And these things takes some time, right? And then it's up to us to keep a reminder, right? To try to contact them every now and then and saying, okay, how is it going? How can we help, right? In order that we don't lose this connection. Yeah.
This episode was brought to you by Google Cloud, a partner that needs no introduction. What you might not have heard of, though, is that Google offers a Google for Startups cloud program where they give you access to startup experts, technical training, business support, and cover your Google Cloud costs up to $200,000 for 2 years, or even $350,000 if you're an AI startup. Scale your startup faster and smarter with Google Cloud. Head over to goo.gle/Swisspreneur.
So also when you mentioned you were engaged with the government in the Middle East, one of the challenges that arose was that they did not want any data in the US, but they were fine with having data in Switzerland. So how did you sort of deal with that?
Well, I think it's not. I mean, I don't know if happy is the right word. I would say more like they are very careful where the data is stored, right? And this happens obviously with any country because food security, I mean, imagine that you have your database of all the food that the country produce, right? And then you have it somewhere else. Right, that is not in your own country. So these are things that are very sensitive, and I think it's for every government. So that's why I understand that. So that's why always the question that we always get is like, okay, but where do you store the data, right? And the Middle East is just because this was the first time that we hear that question, right? But this question also comes from, let's say, in Colombia, we also have had that questions, right? And in the Middle East and etc. So and then it's always, I mean, let's say it's always like, I mean, if you can say like in kind of in a ranking to say this way, I mean, people kind of, for instance, consider Switzerland like a neutral country. So then it's like if you say, oh, we store data in Switzerland, they are like, oh, okay, that's not bad, right? And then it comes like Europe. Exactly. Europe is like also, I mean, it's not that like, like the US, for instance, that is more.
They're also stricter, they like data regulations here.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like, for example, France, you mentioned, has their agricultural data public, but then the DACH region, for example, doesn't. Is it a challenge to set up like different than, protocols and servers and backend infrastructure for each client for, to have it in different countries?
Yeah, I think for us it was, let's say for us it was more like, okay, so first of all, if we want to tackle a global, let's say to build a global product that can go like analyze like everywhere in the world data from everywhere. So we wanted to have, or we want to have as much as data as possible from any location in the world, even from different latitudes in the globe, right? Because then we can train our algorithms in a way that they are generalizable. I mean, they can really work everywhere, right? They are not really focused on one single zone in the globe. So for us, it's pretty much that's like the target. Like we collect the data, right? We train the algorithm, and then we can provide the services, right? But let's say in that sense, for instance, in the case of France, I think they have their own policies, so that's why it's the reason they have it public, right? But for other ones, not. But for instance, if we take data from France and take, let's say, data from Switzerland, let's say, as an example, Germany, and so on and so forth, we can train a system that then later on can guess crops, let's say in Spain, or like also even in the US, or like in Russia, right? So like can go global.
Okay.
Right.
So even though it's highly sensitive data, they don't have a problem with you using it to train your models.
Let's say, I think as long as, I mean, let's say we always need to have their consent, obviously, right? So far with the people that we engage with, basically there was not like a big issue, actually, because in the end, I mean, we are not also not working with like very orthogonal, let's say, or like very different jurisdiction, right? Like for instance, if we are in Europe, I mean, Europe policies are kind of similar everywhere. I mean, of course they are different, but they are kind of like, we can say they are cut it on the same way, kind of, right? And then that's why it's easier. Right. And for this type of this type of system that we were building, we were just scaling up. Like at the moment, I think we are in Europe. We also have a system in Southeast Asia, right? But there is also like things were like kind of open. I mean, they were okay with that, right? So then it's like, okay, right? But I could imagine maybe in the future if we still start expanding also that maybe some will say, no, we don't want that. So then we respect that, right? And they will say, okay, no.
Do you think that will change now? Because up until now, there's been a lot of data just being used very easily because there's not that many regulations in place. Do you think that can change in the future? And would that be a problem, like restricting what you're trying to do?
Well, I think like what you mean is like the regulations in terms of AI. Mostly.
Yes.
So I think that regulation on AI is mostly about using data without consent, right? Like if you see, for instance, these big like LLMs, algorithms, right? They gather information all around the internet, right? But they never ask the users if they were fine using that information, right? And in this case here, it's much more specific because we are, let's say, focusing on agriculture, for instance. So, and in order to get the data, you need to talk to the main, let's say, the client. So basically, you kind of ask them directly if it's fine for them to use that data for this purpose, and if they say yes, so then they are giving the consent. Right. So automatically. So I think it's more about that. So that's why I think, I mean, I'm not afraid of the new regulations on AI in what we do.
Okay.
Yeah. But of course, if we would engage in a project that implies to use an LLM model, language model. So I think then, of course, I think it's something that we would look in detail. Yeah. Actually, I mean, I was even discussing with some friends into developing something like it was compliant, right? It was like using blockchain and also like data. So meaning that people upload the data and then they basically are giving the consent to use that data, right? And then you train a huge model, right? And then everything is in place and is compliance against regulations. Yeah, so I mean there are ideas around that, and these are things that are coming into our conversations, right? But yeah, this is I'm working.
You're always brewing ideas. We'll also talk about your other company we define as well at a later point. But just to touch upon Grundo's basically financial sort of stability right now. So you're running on your revenues, bootstrapped, haven't not raised any funds, and also then having to wait, for a longer period for bigger clients to close the deals with them. Do you have any kind of a plan or like a backup? Like if you need more funding, what would you do?
Yeah, so I think like what we are trying to do right now is really to bootstrap because we have revenue. So in principle, investment would be really nice because it can speed up things, right? But because of our previous experience with trying to raise funds, we realized that this is a little. We need to go into a later stage or a more advanced stage in order to go back to raising funds. But in the meantime, we are really focusing on bootstrapping, right? We are also even focusing on trying to spin off some of the products, right? On in different companies, right? So that each of them can survive by itself, for instance, and then also become like a data provider of other type of companies, right? Even maybe, I don't know, competitors of Grundo or something like this, right? But then we are, all these are things that we have on the table, right? And we are working on, but all of them are really on the bootstrapping until we get something that can be potentially exposed to investors again, right? So,
apart from now, coming up with also more products within Grundo, in 2022, so last year, you started 2 additional ventures, Q-Pools and Redefine. So what motivated you to start that? Is one startup not wild enough already?
Yeah. I think as I was mentioning in the beginning, I'm always trying to do things that are very impactful, right? Because, for instance, I'm originally from Colombia. So one of the issues that I always had in Colombia is that, you don't have really access to investment vehicles. You cannot invest, let's say, in the SP 500, or at least it's very difficult, or it's only for selected individuals or very rich people, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I moved to Switzerland, I saw that this was super common. Everybody could do it, right? So then I saw this gap there. And then on the other hand, people there work very hard, right? And they have savings, and the inflations are high. So these savings are getting eroded. They are losing purchasing power. And then I saw, let's say, on blockchain, a way to solve that issue, right? Because blockchain is basically bringing a financial system to everywhere, wherever there is internet. And we have internet in Colombia. So in principle, we can bring these things there. So I think this was more, this journey started more for the financial inclusion. First, I think we started a project in Q-Pools. We were doing really good, but then it came all this, the Luna crash and then the FTX, all these things. So then basically we have to stop the project for for these reasons, right? But in the end, it's always there, right? So the idea to try to solve it, and even though we lose momentum at that time, the spark in our minds was still there. And then that's why we were working, but very silently, only whenever we have free time, because of course I was very busy with Grundo, right? So then it's just whenever I have some free time, so I was working on that and so on. And then that's why later, so then I was speaking with a colleague of mine that studied finance. And then he brought a very good idea also into the ecosystem. And it was to basically, let's say we define at the beginning, this was Q-Pools, right? So Q-Pools was then stop at the time of the crashes, right? Then later on, we keep working more on the name of We Define.
Right.
And then until we met this friend, and then the friend came with an idea of okay, so you have an index, right? And this index is like a basket of many digital assets, right? Our first idea was okay, so how do you choose the allocation of these digital assets in this index? And then we were thinking on something democratic. So there is a voting system, and then you create this percentage based on the people votes, right?
Yeah.
And then I was talking with this friend about this idea, and then he told me, but most of the times, in terms of finance, right? When you ask the multitude, they are usually wrong.
That's what I was going to say next.
So then I thought, that makes sense, right? And I didn't think about it, right? So then he was coming from finance, so then he has clear concepts on that. And then he said, Miller, why you don't do it differently? Why you don't, instead of just making a voting system on the asset allocation, you make traders to compete with each other, right? And then you take like the top 50 or top 20, and then you use their portfolio to build the asset allocation of the index token. And in that sense, you know that you have let's say, a well actively managed portfolio. Yeah. So, and then I saw
And a
this
portfolio you can actually trust a bit more than others.
Exactly, and people will be more confident to buy this index token, right?
Okay.
And the whole point of we define is really about global financial inclusion, because it's like now if you have like professional traders, which typically are like in, let's say, like in wealthy countries, let's say like this, or like maybe Europe, US, etc., right? And then you have maybe other places where people first that they don't have access to any funding systems, or also maybe everywhere in the world also many people has no education on investment, right? So then basically for those people that they don't have education on investment, or that maybe they don't want to spend time reading about it, so they just buy the index token. Right, and in that way we create this financial, like we bridge this gap between people that knows and people that doesn't know, or that they don't have time to study, right? And then we create an ecosystem where everybody helps each other.
That's really, really interesting, and also calls for another, I think, episode of its own just to discuss financial inclusion as well. But what I'm more curious about is also how do you juggle all these projects, honestly?
Yeah, so I think like, well, I mean, I think it's kind of, it's how you manage time, right? So it's like, of course, I mean, there are sometimes, because Grundo is pretty much focused on like client engagement. So, right, that sometimes there are a lot of loads into the projects, right? So then you need to focus a lot. But then sometimes there is this season in which you are still looking for clients, right? So then you have much more time for the other projects, right? Like we define. But also right now, I think Grundo is also in the position in which we have already employees that they can also take care, I mean, of the heavy workload, right? So then this also kind of like offload a little bit from my shoulder, for instance, and then I can focus on the other project as well, right? I mean, in the end, it's really about having this impact in society. So either in food security or in financial inclusion.
Excellent. So what's next then for Grundo also as we prepare for the effects of climate change?
I think we are constantly monitoring and checking what's going on, right? For instance, there are sometimes initiatives from the countries to have environmental protection. For instance, there is one use case which is really important here, which is like the plastic detection, for instance. We have a technology that it can map the coast of any place on Earth, right, and see where there is plastic, and this could help like the governments to collect or clean these regions, or companies that are focused on cleaning this plastic, right? So these are things that, let's say, right now there is not much. I mean, we have a few people, a few companies using this service, but it's something that you always find this like. Sometimes you find this problem that nobody wants to be accountable. Right. But I think this may change. Yeah, because I mean, in the end, people will realize that climate change is real. Let's say, right? I mean, we really need to take like real actions. Then I think this technology will play a big role. And then we are always developing, depending on the use cases, on the problems that we see around, developing new technologies and then trying to solve those issues. So I think that's what Grundo is doing right now. Like really like, first of all, taking care of their current clients. And second of all, also to to be open to new technologies, new solutions for new problems. Yeah.
All right. And how is it going with the product itself that you are wanting to develop?
So this is going very nice because basically, so we have a team in Colombia working on that. And then I think we are in the process. We already did like a proof of concept and it came quite good. Yeah, in that sense. So we just need to make some other adjustments, let's say, to find out if it's like useful for commercial purposes. Like it's really like precise enough to solve a problem that a client has.
Its product market fit.
Yeah, exactly, the market product fit. And then we are in that process right now.
Okay.
But yeah, I think this is going quite positive. Like
excellent. Would love to get an update from you in a couple of years again on Swisspreneur.
Yes, of course. I'm less than years. So.
Yeah. And what's next for you, Miller? With all these projects you're juggling, what would be your next interest?
So, I mean, first of all, I mean, these are two projects, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, these two companies, I think it would be nice to put them in to grow them,
Yeah.
right? And right now, that's why, I mean, I'm really focusing on that,
Okay.
right? So let's say I don't want to open too many doors also at the same time
Yeah.
because time is limited,
Yeah.
right? Right now, I found this kind of like perfect time management in which you can dedicate to both things, to
Yes.
those journeys. I want to really push them at least to the level where they are independent, they can run and they have
Yeah.
like, revenues, like they are kind of self-sustained, right? And then let's see, who knows? Maybe I will end up doing the anti-gravitational machine. Who knows? So I don't know.
That would be cool to see as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I mean, I'm really like I'm really motivated to use technology to solve like real world
Yeah.
problems. And this is like on my core, right? So I will always be looking for this type of opportunities.
Yeah.
And whenever I see a problem, I see, okay, how can technology solve that, right? And if there is a use case. And now because I have been exposed to the business world, so
Yeah.
I kind of have like an idea of like, okay, so even if this would be developed, there is a client for it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, like, now you can start having this holistic approach
Right.
in which it's not only the technology, but it's also,
yeah,
okay.
not just let's build something super
Yeah.
cool, but let's also try to solve a real problem
Exactly,
that people
really have.
yeah.
And that's what is really nice. I mean, like, I like to see this perspective.
Right.
Okay, I kind of manage the technology, but I want to see if there is someone that would buy that product. Yeah, so if I find this, then I'm happy
I mean,
to
that's
work on
also
it.
critical to keep it going in
Yeah.
the first place. Yeah. Excellent. So what would be then your suggestion to our listeners in terms of resources, books or podcasts or gadgets that you personally like?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, that's a very difficult question. I think I do really like podcasts, I mean, in general,
Yeah.
because you don't need to be, I mean, it's mostly audio, so
Yeah.
you can listen everywhere, right? I know, I mean, not so much into watching YouTube videos. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not personally watching too
Yeah.
much YouTube videos, but I have friends that they do that
Yeah.
a lot. Then I know can be very helpful. But I'm really on the social media, more on the information sector. Like I like to read to see what is
Yeah.
going on. I'm constantly documented what is going on here, there,
Yeah.
and so on.
So what are some of the handles or websites you go to?
Well, I think I use a lot Twitter, yeah, which now is X.
Yeah.
Then I also LinkedIn. I use it a lot also because just to get also an update of what my friends are doing and also the ecosystems. I mean, I follow sites that are like also that give information on the
Right.
environment,
Yeah.
like especially for instance the United Nations sites. Usually
Right.
they give like a very good overview. I also like to follow like big consulting companies because they sometimes prepare these reports that are very
Yeah, it
helpful
can be very
about ESG,
helpful,
for
yeah.
instance, and this kind of reporting is very interesting to see their perspective. And something like this. I'm like various things. I mean, I'm not also married to one thing, so I'm
Yeah.
like exploring. But I'm always like trying to be aware of what's going on around,
Okay.
like on the enterprise level, but also social level.
Yeah.
Like
That's how you
yeah.
get your holistic view, essentially.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
I also on the scientific level. I mean,
Yeah.
also I have a big network in science and technology, so it's like it also comes for free. Let's say, no.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you actively network and meet new people as well?
Yes, a lot.
Okay.
I think I mean, actually my setup right now is like I work from home in the mornings,
Yeah.
right? Because I can focus on like very specific tasks, right? But in
Yes.
the afternoon, then I usually go to a co-working space where I meet many people, and then I get updates from them. I also like discuss and come up with new ideas, new approaches to solve things, and we help each other. Like, so it's a very cool like ecosystem. So I usually go to the SPH at ETH, so the Student Project House,
Yeah.
and it's like really helpful. Yeah.
Great. So we come to the last fun segment of this episode, which is the rapid fire questions. They're just like 4, I would say, easy questions. And
Okay.
are you ready for them?
I don't know. Let's see.
All right. What's your biggest ecological sin?
My biggest ecological sin. Oh, I'm trying to improve myself on this, but I'm still quite bad into separating trash. So, I mean, it's like, let's say when I was living in Colombia, I mean, we never separate trash, right? There is no this culture. When I moved to Switzerland, I learned to separate some type of trash, like, like organic and not organic. And maybe like aluminum is easy, carton is also easy, right? But then you have all these small things like batteries and like light bulbs and this sometimes becomes a little bit overwhelming. So there is like, oh, no, this is like, so yeah, this is something that I'm trying to learn and to improve a lot. I mean, the more I know, for instance, like, I think like a few months ago, I learned that in Switzerland, there is a place where you can bring, for instance, the matratze from the beds, right? And then there is a place to dispose that, right? Because I said, where would I put these, right?
I was also curious how people dispose bigger things, but I'm sure there was a place for
exactly, but I didn't know. So, I mean, it's like, I mean, these things are like, I think there is a lot of learning on my way. But else, I think I kind of like try my best to be very ecological.
Okay, that's good. What's the best quality for a CTO to have?
I think a proper communication on the business side. I think this is also one of the failures that I have seen the most. I think like many people, I mean, they are really good at what they do, but they fail into communication to like other people that has no technical skills. And I find the more I am in the ecosystem and as an entrepreneur, the more I see that, the more I value this skill.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree. What do you wish that AI algorithms could do that they can't right now?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know if this is good or bad. Let's say, I mean, the thing is like the following. There is always this thing about the singularity effect, right? Singularity means that when you are not able to differentiate anymore if it's a human or an algorithm, right? So I kind of like, it would be very cool, right? Because imagine you could like work with AIs that are like people, right? So you can basically, let's say, expand a team and then have like different people contribute in many ways, and you can basically clone them.
Right. Do you think we can get there? I mean, with the whole consciousness question as well?
I believe it's possible. Okay. Yes, I believe it's possible, but I cannot say for sure.
Yeah.
But let's say, but the thing is like, I mean, let's say I was in the beginning. Let's say when I was in physics, right? I was there when all the concept of AI was being born, right? And the whole way how it's built right now. I mean, like many engineers learn the neural network, let's say, just from the book, right? But I saw when this was built based on how the neurons work a little bit. So they got some concept from how the neurons in a real living being brain works, and then they base on that to build the neural network. I mean, of course, it's not exact, but it's like this kind of a similar principle. So so that's why I would imagine that with a big enough network, right? So I could imagine that we will get there.
Okay.
But it's hard to say because also research on the brain is not. I mean, it's just limited.
Yeah.
There is not much advancement on that.
There's much more to know.
Yeah, exactly.
As well.
We don't know much about, for instance, the human brain.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard to say if we capture everything or not.
Okay.
Right. So that's an open question.
And when building a startup, how much risk is too much risk?
Let's say when you come up with an idea, right? Then you kind of know how to solve a problem, but then you kind of not know if there is anyone that would buy this product, right? Or maybe like not a clue even, right? But then I think it's not worth the time until you find the proper customer sector.
So it's important to find at least an idea fit for the market.
Yes, at least have an idea for it. Because I mean, because if you come at, let's say you can invent a problem. Even we invent problems sometimes that they don't exist. So imagine you bring a problem and then you bring a solution, right? But you never think about the potential client segment, right? So I think this is kind of risky, and especially me because I mean I'm working with a few projects, so it's like I need to optimize time, right? So for me right now, I don't jump into a new project if I don't know that there is a customer segment, right, for it. So I think then I consider these two risks in terms of time. I will consume time on that in something that may not go anywhere.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Miller, for your answers and this very insightful conversation. I hope you had a good time today.
Yeah, thank you. It was really good. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was
pleasure.
a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.